Bristol Community College, and thank you very much for coming. This is a very important event for our city and for the state. I thought that this is something that fits immediately in the mission of Bristol Community College. We make our resources available for the community and for public service, and this is a good example of that. I want to thank the Fall River Herald News, Lynn Sullivan and Aaron Frechette and Will Richmond for participating in this event. We're very excited about the importance of it, and our candidates are here and ready to go, and you don't need to hear from me any longer. But it is a thrill for and an honor for Bristol Community College to host this event, and I'm going to turn it over right now, after welcoming you, to Will Richmond, who will be one of the co-moderators with Aaron Frechette. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Sprague. Hello and welcome to the 6th Bristol Representative District Democratic Forum hosted by the Herald News. A few housekeeping items before we jump right into questions for the candidates. My name is Will Richmond. I'm the news editor at the Herald News, and I'm joined by editorial page editor Aaron Frechette as co-moderator for tonight's forum. We'd like to thank our host, Bristol Community College, for providing this space, and FRC Media for broadcasting tonight's forum live. Tonight's forum is intended to be a discussion of issues the Democrat candidates will likely encounter should they be elected. In order to keep the discussion moving, there will be no time limits on responses, and candidates are encouraged to signal to either Aaron or myself if they would like to provide a follow-up response. It will be at our discretion if conversation on a topic should continue or if the time should move on to our next question. In order to get right into those questions, we will forego opening statements tonight. However, each candidate will be permitted 2 minutes at the end of tonight's forum to make a closing statement. The order of those closing statements was determined prior to tonight's forum through a lottery. The Herald News would like to thank each of the candidates who agreed to participate tonight and note that fellow Democratic candidate Gerald Poffin declined an invitation. We ask that those in the audience remain respectful of each other. With this in mind, please limit applause and remarks until the end of tonight's forum, with the exception of right now as I introduce the candidates. First, City Councilor David Dennis. Former Governor's Councilor Carol Fiola. And City Councilor Bradford Kilby. The first question will now come from Aaron Frechette.
Thanks, Will. After months of debate, do you think the legislature got it right with the end result of the transportation finance package? Dave.
Yeah, I do. Actually, I think that the compromise between the governor and the House was as close as they were going to get. I know the governor was somewhere around $1.2 billion. They settled on $800 million. Essentially $500 million for transportation, another $300 million that they're going to raise through utilities, utility cost. So I think the $800 million to start, I think it's a good start. What we have to understand in the Commonwealth and across the country is that we are very, very deficient in infrastructure in terms of our roads, in terms of our bridges. We have somewhere over 450 or so bridges that are structurally deficient in the Commonwealth. We have a number of roads that are structurally deficient. And I've talked frequently about transportation issues as it relates to education and as it relates to job development and economic development. The problem is if we don't maintain our roads and bridges, simply interstate commerce becomes more difficult, and companies aren't going to move here, especially down here in the South Coast. Fortunately for us, we're experiencing an influx of money in terms of about $750 million on the waterfront. We have a $200 million bridge, Veterans Memorial Bridge. We have over $200 million that's in the spaghetti ramps, which is part of the Accelerated Bridge Program. And I also sit on the Route 79 Working Group, where we're looking to relocate and lower Route 79 so that becomes an open boulevard. Those are extremely, extremely important programs, infrastructure programs for this area. If we don't get those right, again, it affects everything. It affects education, it affects transportation, and it certainly affects economic development. So I think we'll see some expenditures over the next several years. We'll need to continue pushing for South Coast Rail. I know some folks don't agree or think that South Coast Rail is going to come down here, but some of the alternatives that have been explored, the Route 24 widening or the rapid bus, have been vetted. They're not practical, so we're back to South Coast Rail, which is the most practicable. It's an expensive program. We're probably not going to see that for another 10 years. But this local delegation needs to be absolutely, positively united on pushing forward South Coast Rail. We need it down
Dave,
this area.
not to interrupt you. We'll get to more South Coast Rail later, so let's move on to Carol.
Could we respond in any fashion? I mean, the transportation plan, obviously it was a compromise. What the governor came out with was very, extraordinarily high, and it still probably wouldn't have done everything we need to fix the roads and bridges and the repairs that we need, along with the South Coast Rail. So we needed something, and I feel it was somewhat of a compromise. When I speak to the constituents out there, they don't want to see taxes, even with the compromise that was put into place. But we know we have to do some repairs, and we have to work on our transportation. And we also know with that budget that was just allotted, it's not enough to do what we need to do for South Coast Rail. I agree, we need to fight for it. We've been fighting for it and unified for it for 30 years, 25 years. We've got to continue fighting, and I think what Attorney Dennis was saying was that I had mentioned innovative ways. Let's look at, while we're waiting for South Coast Rail for 25 years, could we look at some other alternatives while people are fighting their way up to Boston and back? There are HOV lanes in other communities. We don't have it. As soon as you hit 495, you're at a bottleneck. How many of us have driven 495, south of 495 on 24? It's where we're backed up in Taunton. We can't get back here. While we're waiting for South Coast Rail, maybe a $35, $40 million project is more palatable in the meantime, while we're going to wait for the appropriate amount of funding that we're going to need. It's going to be $1.8 billion today, probably $2 billion, maybe $3 billion by the time litigation ends. Only once we get Army Corps of Engineer approval. We've been waiting for that. We've been waiting for that for a long time. We don't have that. Once that comes through, you can be sure, and these attorneys know that, there'll be litigation from all sorts of places. I will fight for it. I think what's going to be most telling will be when the Army Corps of Engineer plan comes through, and I'm fortunate enough to be serving. We'll look at that plan, we'll see what comes next, and we will fight for funding toward this. There's not enough right now. We need more to make South Coast Rail a possibility, and I believe that we need to continue to look for creative solutions to solve the problems that we have in front of us right now in getting to and from Boston.
Well, I'll save the comment with regard to the rail when the question's asked, but as someone who I think has, over 16 years, has compromised with other elected officials on many, many issues, I agree. I think the compromise that was reached for our transportation system throughout the state was a good one. However, I thoroughly understand Deval Patrick's passion. He is in his last term, and he wants to see some very solid improvements made. Transportation is the key, especially for a city like Fall River and a town like Asona, is key for us to help get people gainfully employed and get jobs to our area. And Carol was right. I mean, I've been hearing about that for many, many years in terms of enlarging Route 24 and making it just much more friendly, user-friendly for workers that travel to and from Boston. So we have some major investments I think we have to do in the area of transportation. Our roadways, obviously, our Route 24 itself, the exit ramps, the off-ramps, the infrastructure. And once again, why has this taken so long to happen? Why has Route 24 not been improved? Those are the questions we have to ask, ladies and gentlemen. For far too long, the city of Fall River in this area has been a second thought in Boston, and those days have to end. And we need to represent a state representative and work as a delegation in order to see that things are improved and worked out in a different fashion. So thank you.
Just continuing on with transportation, we talk about some creative solutions that we, Attorney Kilby and I were just mentioning, widening, HOV perhaps. However, there's other projects that are important. Right now, we're about to undertake approximately $285 million project, those spaghetti ramps that everybody's been hearing about. We're going to be facing that soon, and we're going to hear a lot of complaints unfortunately, for the progress that it's going to bring. And it's going to be exciting to see happen. It's an accelerated project. It's going to take about 3 years, and they're coming down. But keep in mind, there's another phase to that project, transportation-wise, that I believe we need to fight for as your state representative. Those dollars, another $35, $40 million for the Waterfront Boulevard. Some of you may or may not be familiar with that project, but that's north of the spaghetti ramps. And that's the project that we need to continue to rally to move on next, as a next phase, because until that happens, until we open up our waterfront with the wonderful developments that are going on now, we're faced with being, Attorney Kilby said, second-class citizens. I'm not going to say that, but we've got to fight for the money that we can get. If we're fighting for $2 billion and it still hasn't happened yet, we've got to see how real that is. I want South Coast Rail. There's nobody I've ever spoken to that doesn't want South Coast Rail transportation. All I'm saying is, $2 billion today, $4 billion in 10 years, lawsuits in the meantime, shorter money. Let's make improvements now. Let's get the money down here instead of it going everywhere else over the state.
You had a comment, Councilor?
Yes, I would just add, what I'm hearing out there in the public, and this is totally linked with the transportation question, is that people are hurting. We have one of the highest, I think it's the latest report, we're third. The third highest unemployment rate in the state of Massachusetts. Okay? That's nothing to be proud of. And transportation is fundamentally linked with that. If we look at the waterfront, the city council, myself, Dave Dennis, and others who are here, working with the administration, passed a rezoning issue and to make it much more easier for developers like Remy's and Commonwealth Landing to come in. So the spaghetti ramps is an exciting project. I believe it's going to start in a couple of months, it's my understanding. And again, it's just going to open up our waterfront to a whole other world of possibilities for our city. So we have to continue to invest in transportation as much as we can, and that is when hopefully we're going to see a change here in the city in terms of our economic climate. Thank you.
What the audience should know is that there is actually, and as I said earlier, there's a working group, Route 79 working group that I sit on, have been sitting on for quite a while. Just so you know, there's a lot of activity on Route 79. In fact, the working group, we have the designs down to approximately 3 that we're looking at. That project is going to be underway as soon as there's adequate funding. There was some funding at one point several years ago. That funding wasn't used. It was sent back to the federal government to do design and study. Where we're at right now is now that we've got it down to 3, the working group will continue through that process, and by the fall we should have it down to a design, and that'll begin the process of engineering and designing the Route 79, lowering Route 79. That project should be done probably 2020, 21, or the year 2022, depending on how quickly we can get that done. As a state representative, I can absolutely guarantee you that I'll be absolutely sure that that program gets done and done on time. And I know the other delegation is very concerned about that project getting done quickly. Many folks in the city always thought that those 3 projects were going to be done in unison, and they're not. It presents a real challenge to the city because there's several developable acres, somewhere in the range of about 10 developable acres on that waterfront that'll be affected by whether or not and how we lower Route 79. It's an absolutely critical project. It's the most important project out of the 3. It's the smallest, it's the most important, it's being worked on, and those of us in the community that have been working that for quite a while, and we'll stay with the process until it's completed in the early 2020s.
We'll stay with transportation, and everyone's in agreement in favor of South Coast Rail, but there still is not a funding mechanism for getting this done. So as new legislators potentially, how do you convince your colleagues on Beacon Hill to fund this project? And we'll start with you, Carol.
Well, that's the $25 million question. First and foremost, we want to see, once the Army Corps of Engineers study comes out, and this current transportation budget, and the monies that we have right now, let's see what gets earmarked and allotted. We're not, we're only going to get, what, 35 million maybe, 40 million, depends what we're going to get out of this. We need to hear from Boston. And as your state representative, they will hear from me. They've heard from me before. They'll hear from me again. We need to get assurances that dollars are designated for South Coast Rail. If that doesn't happen, if it's sitting there in a pool, it's going to go. We've got a governor, as Attorney Kilby just said, that is pro-transportation. I applaud him. I worked closely with Governor Patrick. The problem is Governor Patrick's not going to be here in another year. Who's going to be here? And who's going to remember the promises that were made, just like the other 5 governors have given us? Okay? They've all told us that we want to do it, we want to do it. We've had ribbon cuttings, groundbreakings. I remember being at UMass Dartmouth at this big announcement. It's Governor Patrick even, who I have a great deal of respect for. Governor Patrick couldn't get us the money. How are we going to do it? We're going to have to go up there and get that first piece of money allocated. If that money doesn't get designated for South Coast Rail, I'm going to tell you honestly and candidly, because that's how I am. You want South Coast Rail and I want South Coast Rail. If we don't get money designated now out of this piece, this budget, and projects start happening, Taunton, South, Myrick's Junction, all the rails stop being worked on in the bridges, it's going to be a little doubtful. If we can't get a piece of that money now from the transportation money to get started, how are we going to get $2 billion and $4 billion? I want it. I'll fight harder than anyone. If anybody knows me, I am a fighter and an advocate, and my mind is heard. And I want to do that with South Coast Rail. I want to work with Paul Schmidt and Alan Sylvia and Mike Rodricks and everyone. It's going to take, you said, how is it going to be done? Only if immediately upon, soon after election, we have a working group closely get together and we all sign on the dotted line that we're going to vote no on everything as a group unless this gets funded and we get the money. That's how things get done. If we don't do that, I say that a little tongue-in-cheek, but drastic measures, we're not going to be heard because it's $2 billion now, like I said. So my point was, while we're waiting for the next governor and the governor after that, could we not look at some realistic transportation projects that solve some of our problems of getting back and forth to Boston, widening HOV lanes? Yes, it's millions of dollars, but it's surely a lot less millions of dollars and billions of dollars less. And so working together with our delegations in the area and trying to have that strength in numbers, not that it hasn't been tried perhaps, but that's what we have to do and make that a priority project.
Well, what Carol just explained, that's how I've performed as an elected official in Fall River for 16 years. And I'll give you some specific examples. When it was the belief just last year and the year before that there wasn't enough educational spending here in the city and to meet net school spending, I see Mayor Flanagan here. A coalition or a group of city councils went into his office, spoke with him face to face, and we got it done. Working with the mayor, we met net school spending because it's so important to our city. So maybe it's a simplistic answer, Will, but there's power in numbers. There is power in numbers. The first thing that I will do, I promise you, if I'm elected, I will file legislation. I'll ask every other area legislator to sign on to it. The first thing we have to do is set a timetable for commuter rail and stick to it. That's so fundamental. We don't have that right now. A timetable, stick to it, legislation is filed, and then we'll be on our way. Thank you.
Dave?
I think part of the problem over the years has been there's a prevailing culture up in Boston that allows politics to be pretty much Boston-centric. Unless we get beyond that whole philosophy, the South Coast is going to continue to struggle. The problem is, or the good news rather is that the South Coast has a tremendous lot to offer, and not only for this area but also for Boston. Boston right now has a huge housing problem. They need to build somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 new units a year. It's extraordinarily expensive to live up there. One of the ways to solve that problem is commuter rail. Allow access to the South Coast where housing is a lot cheaper. So it's to their benefit to expand South Coast Rail. We're the only community within 50 miles throughout the Commonwealth that does not have commuter rail, does not have access to rail. So the message from the legislative delegation down here needs to be that we're absolutely positively united, and we're not going to live with the same Boston-centric culture as we have for years. Look, I could sit up here and tell you for the last several years what I've done in the City Council. I have an absolute record of accomplishment and achievement. And I also had the same record as a corporate manager for years. I led the best division at Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare ever. So I'm results-driven. I've done it there. I've done it in the city council. I mean, when I was, last year, when I became chair of the committee on, tourism, tourism and economic development, within the first 6 months, we had a tourism summit that took the prior council more than 2 years to do, and they never did it. And so I'm results-driven. I think we can get that commuter rail here. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but we're going to get that. We'll get it here.
All right, and I'd like to continue along this line that's been brought up in this conversation about building those relationships up on Beacon Hill. If you can each explain, with the possibility of entering midterm when it's difficult to build those relationships, what will you do to create those relationships up on the Hill? And we'll start with Greg Kilby.
Thank you. Well, I think, and I'm sorry if I'm going to repeat this 16 years, but it's significant and it matters. I've begun many years ago building relationships with local elected officials, from Michael Rogers, from Paul Schmidt, Joe Menard, Dave Sullivan, others. I've been able to work with other elected officials, and I've proven that. And I'll give you a practical example that is occurring in this race. I've received every single endorsement so far from all the organizations that offered one. Every single one. The Mass Teachers Association, the Greater Florida Labor Council, the AFL-CIO, and also individuals that work with me in government. And I think there's no better example that I can give when your peers that you serve with support you. Ray Mitchell, Eric Poulin, Danny Rigo, Linda Pereira, and there's more. So I think that's who I am. I'm able to make relationships, work well with people in order to get things done. That's my record. That's my future, hopefully, up in Boston, and I'll make you proud with that. So I've done it in the past. It's coming together now as a result of how I deal with other people, and that's what I bring to the table, and that's what I'll bring to Boston. Thank you.
Do you have any existing relationships, with state officials in Beacon Hill, be it, with the speaker, with other legislators?
Yeah, Jean Fox. I know, we're all kind of friendly with Jean. I've had some very nice conversations with her, and she is committed with regard to commuter rail. I said our local delegation as well. Sam Sutter, district attorney. Obviously, he's the chief law enforcement officer in the entire Bristol County. So to have someone like myself that he feels is really going to strengthen gun laws and protect our citizens and get gangs off the streets. Yes, so I've cultivated many relationships. Also, as I said, with the endorsement process that has just gone on, these endorsements don't happen by accident, okay? Each and every organization I mentioned earlier, and there are more, each candidate was invited up to Boston for an extensive interview. And as I said, I've received every single endorsement. And that means something. So not only other elected officials, I think, I built relationships with over the 16 years, but this race also, even beyond that, the organizations who are looking to see Fall River improved, organizations that want to see more police on the street, want to see smaller class size. These organizations, I've already have relationships through these endorsements, and I will work well with them and work tirelessly for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Dennis.
I've been working with organizations down in this area long before I got elected, as a private citizen and now as an elected official. I've had many conversations. I've worked for years with the Regional Planning Agency, SERPED. I know Jean Fox quite well. We've had many conversations about South Coast Rail. I receive updates from her on a regular basis. I know the folks up at MassDOT very well. I've testified many times on local issues at MassDOT meetings. I know the folks at Mass Office of Tourism extremely well. When I put on the Tourism Summit last year, first time ever in this area, it was attended by folks from all over New England. It was extraordinarily successful, and it has generated a conversation about tourism in the city that has been unlike any other. Now, let me just say that when I ran for state representative in 2010, I received 19 endorsements, just like my opponent has mentioned he's had some endorsements. I had 19 endorsements. In fact, there was an endorsement that I didn't get. Now, the bad news about endorsements is that you become beholden to those folks that endorse you. They have expectations, and there are strings attached. And so, in this election, I'm just as happy not to have them. I'm not going to Boston to represent any organization, any union, or anybody else. I'm going to represent you, those people who vote for me. All those organizations, very fleeting. The strings attached to those, you have obligations. And believe me when I tell you, if you don't vote the way they want, the next time around, they don't endorse you. So I'm very happy not to have those endorsements this time. As I said, I'm going to go to Boston with no obligations other than the folks in this room who will be voting for me, and the people of the 6th Bristol District and of Sonnet. So, that said, I have plenty of, I'm very familiar, I'm very familiar with the local delegation. I know all of them very, very well. I know the federal delegation very, very well. I have absolutely no problem. I've testified in Boston. I have no problem going to Boston and doing exactly what I've done down here and producing the same results, the same successful results down here as I will in Boston.
Mr. Kilby had just a
Yes.
follow-up.
Thank you. Well, my colleague, Dave Dennis, this has been a very, very cordial election, and we're going to keep it that way. But just to comment, I mean, I did receive the endorsements, and Councilor Dennis, Councilor Fiola, and myself went to the interviews. So if Councilor Dennis didn't want the endorsement, why did he go to the interview? I guess that's what I want to say. Now, to insinuate that these endorsements mean that I'm bought and paid for, it's crazy. That's not the case. Never will be the case. But I'll tell you what the most important thing is, we're getting these endorsements, okay? 1,500 working families are part of the AFL-CIO. 1,500 families,
hold your applause.
Families that live, work, raise their families, send their kids to school in the 6th Bristol District. I am honored and humbled to have their support.
Thank you. And I just want to remind the audience, please hold your applause. This is not a pep rally. This is a debate. Just please, behave yourselves for this debate and let everyone have their say. Thank you. Mrs. Fiola, please.
Okay. I think the question was about relationships in Boston, and I will just tell you that I am sitting here of the three candidates. I will tell you I do come with the strongest relationships in Boston. I worked with 4 governors. I'll remind you of that again in my closing statement. I worked with the legislative leaders. I worked with the delegation, the entire legislative delegation in my 40 cities and towns. I earned their respect, and I respected them and they respected me. I had excellent working relationships. We did not always agree, but when I worked with 4 governors, I will just tell you this. I was speaking to a labor person yesterday who did in fact be a part of endorsing Attorney Kilby, but he told me, he said, I was with the governor last week and he sung your praises. I was with the former lieutenant governor. And you know why they did? Because I told them where I stood. I agreed, I didn't agree. I let them know. I did it professionally. I didn't grandstand. I told them what I thought. Whether it was Mitt Romney, who wasn't coming to the table about LNG, I spotted him, but I do it professionally. And for those reasons, the 10 years of establishing relationships, yes, the local delegation as well. Mike Rodricks and I have worked together for a dozen years. Everyone here I've worked with. And I did that because I grew up in this community. I've served this community. I've raised my family in this community. I've served on dozens of boards, not just to put my name there. not just to say I'm on a board. Matter of fact, I refuse. This is the time you're supposed to say nice things about yourself, I guess, when you're running in a campaign. But, you know, I've chosen not to serve on a board. Give me a committee job. I founded groups for Durfee High School after my daughters left so I wouldn't catch any abuse, you know, of why do you want to do that for your kids? We started a 501c3 corporation. In 3 years, we've raised and given out over $50,000. I'm on the Stepping Stone board, and I bring this up in helping. We brought Chris Herron in the other day. We raised money. During the middle of all this campaign, I'm out soliciting money for other organizations because you know what? This community is too important to me. It's important to you. It's important to me. I've established a reputation that I stand behind. I don't need this job. I want this job because I look at my experiences in business. I've been successful at business because I've worked hard. I work as a realtor right now. I'm a top producer. What does that mean to you? It means out of 30 people, I'm almost at the very top. I say that to you because I get results. I work hard. I'm going to work hard for you if you elect me as your state representative. You can be assured of that. And the relationships that I have worked hard to create and my reputation stands. You can ask these people. Yes, Attorney Dennis brought his Tourism Council Summit down here last year, and in his brochure he highlighted Sarah Peake, a legislator. She supports me. Our Senate President, Terry Murray, sought me out. I was at an event. She said, Carol, I hear you're running for state rep. I said, I am, Senate President, Madam Senate President. I didn't ask her to endorse me, because you know what? I want the endorsement of you and you and you. I want Zalia and Lewis and Tony and Joan. That's who I want. I want you to have confidence in me. But yes, the Senate President sought me out 4 months ago and said, I want to endorse you, come up, take a picture. We did. I only put it in my last brochure. If those of you are good voters, you're getting my mailing. I put that in that last one. I didn't want to make a big stink because what's important to me is that you want to vote for me and you want to vote for me. But I will tell you this, I do have the endorsement and support of a lot of people in Boston. And like the example that happens along the way, what they say, be careful on your way up because you meet the people going down. Well, it's interesting. The people I've met in Boston over the 10 years that I served, they're in different positions today. Leadership positions in Mass DOT, leadership positions. I have the Colonel of the State Police, strong supporter, former Colonel, strong supporter and endorser. I will learn more from these people. I am so honored to have the respect of so many people, so many governors, the chief, our former Senator, Mo Cowan, interim senator. I invite you to call him. He'll tell you, oh gosh, Councilor Fiola, she was tenacious. I was in his office every week, fighting for people here. You say, well, what did you fight for on the Governor's Council, Carol? Those of you who don't know, on the Governor's Council, you approve or disapprove of appointments that the governor makes. I was a part of 1,000 of them, over 1,000 of them. But the one thing that I could do to help our region, and it's been pointed out by Attorney Kilby and Attorney Dennis, that we still are looked at as a second class, or they don't even know where we are down here. And it's true. I saw it in my 10 years. But I said, what I'm going to do, even though the governor makes these nominations, when I know that there were openings throughout my district, whether it was the Cape, Taunton, Plymouth, New Bedford, Fall River, I advocated and fought to see local people be appointed. And guess what? I am honored that Judge Philip Rivard Raposa is the Chief Justice of the Appeals Court of Massachusetts. That's no accident. I'm honored that a local guy, Tom McGuire, the last time a Superior Court judge was named out of Fall River was Beatrice Mullaney, God rest her soul, 40 years ago. He is now a sitting judge and doing a fine job. People, and I could name you dozens more throughout the district. I fought every week. There's openings. And I didn't fight to say, you've got to put this person. There's got to be people from our region. Because people from our region or the outskirts of Boston were always feeling like, if I put my name in, I'll never get it. I'll never get it. And I would come down and hold seminars and put things in the paper to say, apply. Because I'm up there and I'm watching people apply 4 and 5 and 6 times. And then they do it again. So my point here is I have relationships in Boston. That was the question. I receive calls through this day from people saying, I hope you get elected, because I look forward to working with you. And what will that do? It allows me to hit the ground running in September if I'm fortunate enough to be elected by the people. You know, yes, I did go to the endorsements, and Attorney Kilby's correct. I did go to some of them. I even went to one where I knew they were voting against me because I was told the week before. I was told the week before they were voting against me. But to preserve the process, I went and I did my thing. But what I'm saying to you is I will guarantee I will be the candidate to hit the ground running, to get up there and build relationships and work off the ones that I have and fight tirelessly for this district.
Move on. Hold the applause, please. Moving on. The fiscal year 2014 budget was not approved until after the fiscal year had already started. Do you feel it's good government to wait until the final days and weeks of the legislative year to debate and vote on the budget? We'll start with you, Councilor Dennis.
No, I don't, and I think it creates a lot of anxiety in cities and towns, especially those that are waiting for the aid that comes down from the state government. And so, as a legislator, I would hope that I would be part of a process that would be a lot more efficient. We're required here in the city to have our budget completed by the end of June, and I don't think that's a big expectation for state government. We need to know what that money is for the schools, local assistance, and again, I think it creates a lot of anxiety, unnecessary anxiety for cities and towns and municipalities throughout the Commonwealth when that budget isn't completed and completed on time. And I think it's a process that the legislature could do a lot more efficiently and really could and should do on time.
I would agree. I speak to, you know, throughout this campaign, I started meeting with stakeholders back in January. You all think this is a quick special election. We've been at this since I know I started in January when we knew that Rep. Sullivan was going to take the position. But I've been meeting with stakeholders everywhere, whether it's community service organizations, social service agencies, community colleges, police, fire. I've been meeting with everyone throughout this district, business stakeholders, etc. But on the public side, it's frustrating. Organizations and that I have served on have a piece of their budget come from the state, and it's coming down to June, and people are worried that they're going to lose their job. They don't know if it's going to be funded or not. You know, I sat in front of the Child Advocacy Center, which I wholeheartedly must tell you, if you've never been, you've got to go by and see the work these people do that no one wants to have to do, but they do to help abused, you know, victims. They're waiting to see if they're going to get their little $100,000, which sounds like a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but with what they're doing and the services they're providing, if they lose those services in a week or a few days, the results are traumatic for some young kids who've been abused and are going through the legal process. So my point is, it's a terrible system in terms of waiting till just after the budget. Now you're waiting. Imagine you don't get funded, and now you're backpedaling. I'm on the Stepping Stone board, and I chose to be on that board because of the high drug and alcohol abuse in our own community. And they were cut. There's only one homeless shelter in the city of Fall River for adult emergencies homeless. Now, nobody wants to talk about homeless. It's a reality. It's a reality. There are people that under misfortunate situations are faced with being homeless. Thank God that shelter is there. I didn't really know all about it until I got involved with the organization, but they were cut tremendously. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to make a plug. On August 17th, we have a walk for the homeless shelter. Any donations are welcome. And that's why Chris Herron was here the other night to speak, and he donated all of the proceeds to the homeless shelter. So when you see a budget, and it's after the date that you're funded for, that doesn't make sense. So what would I do? I'd first go up and understand why this is happening, and try to understand it better. And if I could have any voice in saying, can we move it up a few weeks? Can we have this dialogue ended now and give these people a chance? And I don't know why the rest of the legislative delegation wouldn't agree. So I do think it's awkward, and I would like to figure out how we end that.
Councilor Kilby?
Yes, I'm in agreement with Ms. Viola and Attorney Dennis. And, you know, practically speaking, it was very frustrating. You're a member of the school committee many years where the numbers would fluctuate. We'd meet with the superintendent. We weren't too sure exactly what our Chapter 70 money would be. You have the House version, you have the Senate version, you have the governor's version, and at times it gets dragged out. Teachers get pink slips, administrators get pink slips, and it causes a great deal of anxiety for a school department. On the city side, same thing. I know, sorry to mention Mayor Flanagan again, but I'm sure he's in agreement with me. We have multiple meetings when I was on the city council and when Ed Lambert was mayor with Sean Kadim and going over the numbers. Well, maybe it's going to be this, or maybe it's going to be this number. If it's this number, we have to cut this. If it's this number, we can't do this project. So, correct. I think it's a huge issue, and I've seen in practice how it impacts a city like Fall River. We are very reliant on local aid, Chapter 70 money, and it should be improved, and I'll work to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Democrats can represent a wide variety of political ideologies along the political spectrum. So, just very briefly, if you could each describe to me, where you would describe yourself as a Democrat. Are you a liberal Democrat? Are you a moderate Democrat? Are you a conservative Democrat? Mrs. Fiola, please.
Funny, I have been a Democrat all of my life, and hardworking parents. I thought I was rich until I applied by myself to college, funded myself to college, arrived on a college campus, and met people on my floor that were, I guess, I thought wealthy. I thought I was rich, but I realized I wasn't. I was just rich in love and all those other things. But as a Democrat, probably I've gotten a little bit more moderate in my life as I've gone on. And I say that because there are a lot of issues that people talk about, and they typically will attribute some of those to either being liberal or a little bit more conservative. But I really look at issues kind of common sense and practical. Give me an issue, I'll tell you where I stand, okay? I see the tremendous issues we have with education. Its educational attainment level is one of the epidemics we have here that is just such our problem. So when I look at that, you say, well, where do you stand with education and all that? Well, take a look at, some of my stuff in the Herald News, the articles about lifting the caps on charter school potential. It might alleviate some of the numbers in the public school to give our class sizes a little break and give an opportunity for choice for our families. Is that moderate? Is that liberal? What is that? I don't know. I think I'm a moderate Democrat who's here for working people and people in need, and on each issue, I will make a decision, and I will not pigeonhole myself to being any one thing. I will pigeonhole myself on the particular issue, and all along this campaign, people have asked me where I stand on something. I'll tell you. Call me, email me, text me, whatever you want to do, I'll tell you where I stand. So I'm probably a little bit moderate to, a little less, moderate to liberal, but a little more moderate.
Thank you.
If that answers your question.
Councilor Kilby.
Yeah. I guess I would answer that question by saying that Ted Kennedy is one of my heroes. He always has been. And being born and raised in this city, grew up on a Flint Street, on Buckley Street, in a two-family home with my mom and dad, my brothers and sisters. My father was a union painter. Many days he would come home after he painted the Braga Bridge filled with paint. My mother was in the garment workers union. My wife's a teacher. I was a former teacher. So I'm for working people. I'm for early child education. I'm for reducing class size. I'm for having safe streets. I'm for hiring police officers and firefighters. So I'm in this to a certain extent to be a voice for people who do not have a voice. So with that said, I think actually I say this as a joke. I think since this election started, I think I've become a little bit more liberal than I was when I started. But those are my principles. Those are what I stand for. Like I said, Ted Kennedy was always a role model for me, and the things that he championed, fuel assistance for the elderly, block grant funding, supporting community colleges like BCC, which, by the way, gets evaluated every year, and they're number one in the state out of all the community college. However, they get the less funding than all the community colleges. And Dr. Sprague's nodding his head. So with that said, those are my priorities and my principles, and I get a great deal of enjoyment by helping people that need my help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Dennis, briefly, please.
I think my democratic values began probably when I was a child. My family have always been Democrats, both sides of my family, also my in-laws. I simply come from a very working class family. My parents bought their own home in 1957 on 2nd Street. We grew up in Clarkey Row. I left home when I was 17 years old to join the Air Force. I became an Air Force medic. After my release from the Air Force, I put myself through school on a GI Bill. I came back in 1980. I started a career in healthcare at a large health insurer in Providence. I was very successful at that. I left as a division manager, managing all of southeastern Massachusetts, Cape and the Island. Went back to law school. I paid for law school. My wife and I paid for law school on our own. She worked at Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, and we had a small business in town, so, fine art and framing. We did a little catering on the side. And so I've always had a great appreciation and all my friends were the same way. And so I have a great appreciation for working class families like the ones we came from, who deserve fair wages, quality affordable health care, an opportunity at a quality education for their children, starting with places like BCC, funding public schools, good working conditions, increased minimum wage, so they have a living wage. So sick days. Working class families really built America, they've sustained America, and they'll grow America. That's where I come from. Those are my values. Those are my democratic values. And those things have governed my life as far as I can remember, and will continue to do so. And that's why I value public service as much as I do. That's why I've pursued public service over the years. And that's why I'm very excited and enthusiastic about becoming a state representative. Because I think I can replicate at the state level what I've been able to do here at the city level.
So then generally, just, if you had to choose where along the spectrum you would describe yourself?
A progressive Democrat.
Thank you.
We're quickly running out of time here, so we'll ask one last question before moving on to closing statements. As we sit here in Fall River, and each of the three of you reside in Fall River, we don't want to forget that part of the district is also in Freetown, which is split up into multiple districts. So I want to ask, how do you make sure Freetown is properly represented in Boston? And Carol, we'll start with you.
Well, they're our district, and when I started campaigning out there and meeting all the stakeholders and many residents in Freetown and holding events in Freetown, I would apologize to them first and foremost, and I'm sad that Freetown had to have 2 state reps. They're very well served by Representative Schmidt, but instead of having 1, they've got to have 2. They used to have 3 at one point. So this district covers this sort of eastern northern part of Fall River, and then the part of Freetown that we call a sonnet, and that's the best way to describe it. How do you make sure they're included? By reaching out, showing up, and listening. There's a lot of needs in Freetown, little different and some the same as Fall River. Freetown, they've got that beautiful riverfront park that was supposed to be home to Meditech. We all remember that fiasco? Well, as part of what I'm planning to do, and again, go on my website and see my 5-point plan, one of the priorities is to make sure we direct people to those parks and try to get companies down here that start out in the state level calling and asking for information about locations. I want to see gateway cities legislatively get more preference when companies call up, like the Amazon did or others do, and say, we're beginning our search and we'd like to be in Massachusetts. Can you help us? I want to go up there and fight and say, help us. We're one of the higher unemployment rates. You better be directing them to us. And I'll be knocking, just like I did to former Senator Cowan and the legal counsels before them, I'll be popping in these offices and saying, and making sure I am actively engaged to remind them about directing people this way, and as well looking at legislative remedies for funding gateway cities who have urban high unemployment and directing them down here. Westwood and some of these other communities, Framingham, they don't need these companies the way we do. So that is a huge priority, making sure that when companies are talking to all these agencies up there, I will be a bug in the area, you can be assured, and making sure we can redirect them to places like Freetown and the Riverfront Park. That's important to them. They want to see that developed. They want to see that developed. They also want to see what you want to see, and that is excellent constituent service. When I called and knocked and visited and talked to people, the one thing that people said, well, many things, but talked about former Representative Sullivan was, he was always there for us. And one of the things in Freetown, and it may sound simple, but one of the things in Freetown with all the flooding and the bridges, as a state representative, when you get a call, at that time it was from Jean Fox to Dave Sullivan, you know, she was a select woman at the time, and I know this story because I've heard it many times. At 3 in the morning, if your select person from Freetown calls you because there's an emergency, you got to get up and get going. Mayor Flanagan knows that from being the CEO of the city here. You got to get up and you got to get moving. Well, that's what I plan to do. Give them the Dave Sullivan, unmatched, unparalleled constituent service. That's what you'll get from me. That's important because most people.
Due to time, we're gonna move on.
All right, I'm sorry.
Problem.
Keep going. But you know what? They have the same concerns, but there are some nuances. Okay. Sure. Thank you.
Councilor Kilby.
Yeah, similar response. Solid constituent service, and if I'm lucky to be elected, a sonnet will never be an afterthought and always be a priority. Been going door to door there for many months now, listening to the people, their concerns, one of which we dealt with on the city council is a drinking water issue, where there's a little dispute going on between Fall River and a sonnet. So that'd be one example where I put the proper people in the proper room to try to rectify that situation. But solid constituent service, office hours in the town, just continuing to listen and to be, you know, an agent, so to speak, to address their concerns and their problems. And it's how I think I've performed for many, many years. I think when you're an elected official and you forget who elects you, you're in trouble. And I would never do that. So with that said, my ears would be wide open. They would have my solid attention always, and I would work extremely hard in order to correct the issues that they're facing. Thank you.
Councilor Dennis.
I've already started working on some issues with the sonnet. Last Friday, I had Representative Corey Akins, who's the new chair of Arts, Tourism, and Cultural Development, come down to the city. She spent the better part of the day down here in Fall River, touring some of the tourist attractions and discussing how we can get some funding for tourism here in the city. One of the first places I took her was the Parsons Gallery up in the Sonnet. He was very pleased, the individual was very pleased that I went out of my way to bring her up there because, look, we need to start thinking regionally about these issues, whether it's tourism or South Coast Rail. Sonnet has issues. We have water issues, so they have an issue with the quarry up there, Cape Cod Aggregates. They're looking to put a communications tower up there. They have some school funding, emergency services issues. A lot of these we can address through being a lot more regional, and it's an issue that I think we should spend a lot more time talking about. And as a state representative, one of the things that I'd like to see is more discussion and conversation about regionalizing some of these services, so that places like the Sonnet don't get left out. And you can absolutely be assured, one of the things that I did as a corporate manager, as a division manager, it was we would service accounts. I had the best division for several years in a row. I'm very, 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 very familiar with customer service. So constituent service is exactly the same. So I think the voters of the 6th Bristol District, including Fall River and the Sonnet, will not be disappointed at all. I've done my job as city councilor 24/7. I never stop. I've always got something going. I've had many, many, many successes. We have many things going. As I speak, as I sit here today, we're talking to a cable company that we're looking at to expand cable in this area, more accessible for schools, universities, and many, many projects. And all those projects will absolutely positively include a Sonnet. A Sonnet will be an integral part of my district, and certainly we'll have office hours down there, and they'll be well served.
Thank you. We will now shift to 2-minute closing statements from each of the candidates. First up, as determined by lottery, will be Mr. Dennis.
Ladies and gentlemen, every election is important. And every election is important because it sends a message. It sends a message as to what kind of government we really want. And it's a reflection of who and what we are. And this one is no different. In this election, the message we want to send to Boston is we need to be paid attention down here. We need things on the South Coast. We need infrastructure improvements. We need job creation. And we need infrastructure improvements. Those are issues, ladies and gentlemen, that I have worked on not only as a private citizen, but actively as a city councilor, and I've done so with success. So, who better to send to Boston than someone who has had and has a track record of success? As I mentioned to you earlier, we had a very successful tourism summit, Free Fun Friday. We sent people uptown last year, 30 to 40% increase in business. In February, we created a calendar for school children so they'd have things to do during the school vacation. We just kicked off a book giveaway and literacy program in the city, working on expanding internet, finding a new place for the 30 seconds. Finding a new place for the Vic on the waterfront, which is another reason why Representative Atkins was down here. You will get results. You've gotten results with me as a city councilor. You'll get the same results up in Boston. That's why I'm running for state representative. Many of my issues, many of your issues are state issues. I'll be as effective up on Beacon Hill as I have been effective as a city councilor. That's why I'm running for state representative. That's why I'm asking for your vote on August 13th.
Thank you. We'll now go to Mr. Kilby.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Bristol Community College, President Sprague, and his lovely wife Joanne for hosting this, and obviously the Fall River Herald News for having the debate. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a 16-year record, as I said, of experience dealing with the nuts and bolts of this city and the issues we face. First as a member of the Fall River School Committee, and then as a City Council Vice President. As a school committee member, I was one of the first individuals working with the Lambert administration to push for new school construction projects. And today we've built 13 new elementary schools in this city. It's something I'm very proud of. As a member of the school committee, I received the Friend of Education Award from the Teachers Union, which is a very unusual award to get when you're a school committee member, because of the hard work and dedication and commitment and honesty that I think I imparted to the teachers who trusted me. As a member of the City Council, I was former Chairman of Public Safety, and working with men like Eric and Ray Mitchell, we've always pushed for more police officers in each and every budget that we've passed. Public safety was a huge, huge issue and still is. We had community forums throughout the city, listening to the neighbors' concerns. Presently, I'm the chairman of real estate, and Linda Pereira appointed me to that position a year and a half ago. The committee is functioning very, very well, and we're looking at selling all of those old and antiquated buildings and realizing $1 million profit. My wife Monique and I love this city and this community. We raised our children here, who I'm looking at now, and we would not like any other place to live. This is our home, and this is where we're going to stay. So please, when you think of Election Day, please vote for the individual who has the most common experience with the needs of Fall River, and that's Brad Kilby. So thank you.
Thank you. And we'll conclude with Mrs. Fiola.
Before I begin, I just want to make sure I publicly and on this television station say happy 21st birthday to my daughter Lauren. This is where I asked her to spend it today, as you can imagine. I don't think she's here, but anyway. I'd like to thank the Herald News, Bristol Community College, and Fall River Community TV for hosting this event tonight, and give the candidates a chance to tell you, the listening public, the voters, where we stand on issues, and so I really appreciate that. As you consider the different candidates that are seeking election, I'm hoping that you will consider me, as I ask for your support, to be your next state representative. By now, I hope that you can see I have the passion for this community and this region and the energy and experience in Boston to get things done. This passion, energy, and experience is propelling me back into public service to represent the city and region that I care so deeply for. As a former governor's counselor for 10 years, I have the necessary experience to get things done in Boston. In my time away from Beacon Hill, I've missed fighting and advocating for issues of importance to this area and the people that I love. I believe that if elected, I will be the most experienced rookie state rep in Boston. I worked with the past 4 governors, as I mentioned. I know the current governor, the Speaker of the House, and the Senate President, and they know me. In short, I believe I will be able to hit the ground running. And now you may be asking, what is my agenda and what's my vision for this future? As I see it, your rep has to be your advocate and your voice in Boston, and has to create an agenda that is tailored to your needs and the needs of this region. Not only will I be there to work on issues of jobs, education, public safety, the environment, and quality of life, but I'll maintain a local office, provide you with unparalleled service. So in closing, I hope that I have earned the right to represent you on Beacon Hill, and I promise that you will not be disappointed with your vote. Please vote August 13th for Carol Fiola. Thank you.
That will conclude tonight's forum. Thank you again to each of the candidates for participating, to Bristol Community College for hosting us, and please go out and vote on Tuesday, August 13th.
Yeah, vote.
Thank you. Have a good night.